This time on the Prop Master, well, we start a new project. I know it's about time, right? That's right. This video will not be about a Boba Fett helmet. It's going to be in a similar theme though. I'm finally starting the Sabine Wren helmet. But before you decide it's all the same, trust me, this is a very different animal. First off, I can't find any good templates for this helmet at all anywhere on the internet. Not only that, it's hard enough just to figure out what the helmet actually looks like in 3 dimensions. I have a lot of screenshots over here, but it looks a different shape in almost every one of them. So we're going to have to figure that out first of all, and then we're going to have to go ahead and make the templates. And that's what this video is all about. Instead of starting the process of making the helmet, this video is going to be all about making the templates, figuring out exactly what the helmet looks like in 3 dimensions, and then I'm going to have to basically take this block of polystyrene, which is made of a lot of little layers of polystyrene that I've glued together, and with the use of all of these image captures that were on the internet, and these little outlines which I found, if I can get that close enough to you can see it. These seem to be from Lucasfilm, and it's diagrams that they use when they change the paint scheme on her helmet. Using that and the screen captures, I'm going to turn this into a blank of her helmet that I can use to make a pattern from. And that's going to be quite a bit of work on its own, so we better get started. Okay, I've taken the outlines and I've transferred them onto the block at life size. That way I can just use that as an outline to shape the rest of the block. When I was adding the outline to the block, I noticed that it was actually a little bit too narrow, so I had to add this extra piece of foam onto the side so that it would be large enough. I just want to stop and show you something crazy. I needed to get the arcs and the sides back on the front and the back, and in order to get the dome, I did basically like I'm doing here. I just aimed and then I traced around like that, and I knew it would be, you know, very different when I looked at it from the top, but I was surprised to see how different. So that's what your arch looks like from the top. Well, it's been a couple of days since I was carving on this, but it's not been an uneventful couple of days. I've been working on it. I've just been kind of stuck for a little bit. I was having a hard time thinking or figuring out how I was going to maintain the shape while I was sanding it and everything. And I decided what I would do is I would make these little silhouettes, one side view and one front back view. That way I could make sure that I kept the dimensions right. And as soon as I made these and put the piece of foam into it, it became very obvious that I had already gotten cut way too much of it off, and it wasn't, it was already too late. It was much too small already. So I made it a block, but I wasn't very happy with that either. So I ended up going back to the original one and splitting it in half and putting another piece of 2-inch foam in between it. Then I did the same thing sideways so that it would be larger front to back as well. And then from there, it was just a matter of, I got the right shape using the cutouts. I managed to maintain the right shape. But then came the point of trying to figure out, precisely what Sabine's helmet looks like. And I'm reasonably certain that Dave Filoni went to his animators and said, I want a helmet that's not only different from the other Mandalorian helmets that we've seen in the past, but I want to make sure that it's a shape that is impossible to know exactly what shape it is. Because every angle that you see this helmet, it looks a different shape. If I didn't know they used 3D modeling to make the animated series, I would think it was just illustration errors. It's crazy, every picture, for the most part the helmet looks the same, but it's these areas, the cheek areas, and this lower part here looks different from every angle. Even the eyes, for a certain amount, depending on the angle. You can see it here. I've carved, instead of just drawing them on, I've carved them out so that I could do some more shaping without affecting them, because it took me a while to come up with the eye shape. In fact, in the very end, after I tried about 10 different ways of using a projector to project them on and different measurements, I basically just drew them on. I just eyeballed it, and I was pretty happy with it. But you can see here that from there, it's they have a very different look. And I was having the same problems with the cheek areas here. As you can see, I have like very different angles, but I finally decided on these particular angles here. I'm happy with it. I think it's going to work well. And so I guess it's just time to get back into carving. Just proving that I have never done this before, and this is a first. So 4 more coats of Mod Podge and about 10 hours later, and we're ready to move on to the next step. I'm quite happy with the shape, the way everything turned out, especially on this left side. I did the right side first, and I was really working on getting this concave section here, which I think is probably the most important part, other than the eyes, for Sabine's helmet. And I think it's also the place where most of the helmets I've seen online get it wrong. Most of them seem to be convex here and then just have kind of a cutout. And I can kind of understand where they're coming from. In fact, I was looking for a picture of the bottom of her helmet, and I had several people direct me toward this picture here. And this helmet, and assuming that that is the same type helmet that Sabine has, and I don't think it is, because if you look here, it looks like it has a curve that goes up and then back down, kind of like the Boba Fett style, whereas this helmet here is more like hers, and it just kind of goes back and then fades into the rest of the helmet. And I noticed that her helmet has a very concave shape here, whereas this one is more convex and then dips down here. So comparing this shape at different angles with pictures that I have of Sabine's helmet at different angles, it seems to work. So I'm pretty happy. I was really concerned with getting that here and ended up coming down, digging in too much so that there's way too much of a relief here. So on the left side, I was a lot more careful about that. I got the same concave shape here, but without having such a deep cut here. I think it looks good, and we're ready to move on to the tape. As you can see, I've abandoned the tape and decided instead just to paint it with some of the primer. I was just getting a lot of layers on top of layers and a lot of wrinkles, and I don't think, small imperfections like that affect the pattern too much, but I don't want to push my luck. And I was getting, in some cases, 3 or 4 layers of tape, so I decided that I'd pull that off and just paint it instead. And the whole reason why I wanted to put the tape on it or paint it was just to smooth out some of the texture. It was really hard to gauge the shape of like the dome area and some of this more subtle stuff down here. With the texture of the polystyrene, I wanted a more smooth and consistent color. And I'm glad that I did go with the paint, because I ended up having to do quite a bit of work back here. It had some flat, not very, more squared areas, not very round. So I was able to see that by painting it. I've got that worked out, and there's no point now in repainting it or anything. So besides, I'd have to put the Mod Podge back over it and seal it so that the paint wouldn't dissolve the foam. So there's no point in that anyway. So let's go ahead and start the process of making a pattern for this. I will point out that I've stuck, I don't know if you noticed it earlier, but I just stuck some pins in some key locations around the helmet that helped me locate the center points going up this direction. I didn't really need one for the point here, but you know, I've got, again, back here, plus to help me locate the horizontal lines and these little pieces that go down around toward the ears. There's just some key points that, you know, will make it a lot easier when I start drawing the pattern itself onto here. One last little comment was, with this on here, I can definitely see that there's too much relief here. If her helmet was like this, then there'd be no doubt that it wasn't flat, that it definitely recessed down. And there's a lot of views of Sabine's helmet that I really thought didn't have any kind of relief here at all, and it just came straight around like an old Greek helmet. So this is definitely cut away way too much, but luckily for a pattern I only need half of the helmet, and so the eye is better on this side too. The relief's correct, so we're just going to do this left side. So let's get started. So I've taken the pins out and I've put little X's over where they were, just because when I start moving this around, I don't want it to be hitting those pins. But now I've got the tape down and I've come to the hard part. I've got to decide, well, first I've got to actually redraw the pattern onto here, but then I've got to decide how I'm going to construct the helmet. This is a little bit more difficult than Boba Fett's helmet because it is more fluid. You know, Boba Fett has a clear, the dome stops here and it's got a border on it, and then it's, you know, straight sides from there. Whereas Sabine's helmet flows from the dome into the front of the helmet. It stops reasonably at the ears and across the back, but in the front it continues down, so I have to decide how I'm going to handle that. Plus there's no real trim piece there to cover up the seams and a place to attach the visor itself, so I'll have to work that out as well. But you know, it's all stuff that can be overcome as we come to them. So I guess the first thing we need to do is to mark my straight up and down, you know, my right angles, the center this way, the center this way, and from there we'll start working everything else out. I've never done a pattern like this before either, so it's all been a learning experience. I've been having a really hard time trying to get the boundary between the sides of the helmet and the dome. And so I finally came up with this rig here. I've got the helmet itself on this Lazy Susan, and I have my carpenter square and a level. This surface is level as well. Hopefully this will give me a good line here. Surprisingly, it looks like it's pretty close to right on, which I just can't believe. It's not quite on. I think I might have to cover the line up and then do this again, because it's some areas it's at the bottom of the line and some areas at the top of the line, but oddly enough it's not anywhere near as far off as I expected it to be. And I guess I'm gonna have to cover up this line and then I'll try again. Okay, I thought I was recording before, but I wasn't, so you missed it, but I can show you. It did indeed work. I got a nice level line through here, and I moved down to this lower level and did the same thing. And was able to get my bottom part, and it lines up well with the top. So I'm happy with that now. This is still a lot of material here. I'm a little concerned about that. The other thing that's a problem with this helmet is that if you'll notice this top part here, the dome actually continues down further than that. But I did notice that on all of the illustrations of the helmet are the same way. So this piece here continues to curve below it. And I think I can get the craft foam. I think we'll be able to handle that. But it's going to be some work. I'll have to be really careful. That's why I think it's probably going to be really important that I make this the top, excuse me, that I make this line here the bottom of the dome, so that I'll have a really good line when I start putting this piece on. I can make sure that lines up perfectly. I think all I have to do now is to cut out my pieces for the dome, and I'll be ready to start making the templates. Well, I think I've got everything laid out, and it's time to cut it out. But I need to be really careful cutting this out, so I'm probably going to end up with it in my lap, and you're not going to be able to really see what I'm doing. So I'll be back as soon as I cut these pieces out. I've cut everything, and so now I'm just going to peel it apart and hope everything goes perfect. I don't ask for much. Taking the Mod Podge with me. Okay, there's the equivalent of the cheekbone. And I haven't decided whether or not I'm going to leave the cheek as part of the entire side, or whether or not it's going to have to be separate. I guess once I take it off, I'll know. Always makes me worry when it comes off real quick like that. It looks pretty good. Notice that I made the exact same mistake here as I did in the original videos. I put the A there instead of a 2. It's weird. And there's the other part. Okay, I guess I've just got this one big piece kind of. Got this mark, so I'll cut the bottom parts afterwards. Cut it. I just missed a couple of spots now. I hope I don't regret using that spray mount on the aluminum foil. I did it because I wanted to make sure that it stayed in place. It wasn't loose. Some of it seems to have stuck really well to the helmet. Most of it hasn't, but it didn't really stick that well, but some of it is being troublesome. I think at this point it's going to be easier to do the back. Okay, that's pretty flat too, so okay, it's just a matter of turning all of this into something that's a little bit more usable. It's time to transfer this tape pattern onto some thick cardstock. And if you'll notice here, there's still some curve to this. Sabine's helmet has been a real pain because it was designed in digital space. It was not built by a prop maker, and you can tell. Little things like the fact that the curve from the helmet continues down into the sides past where some of these other pieces are going to have to attach, including the earpiece. In fact, it works its way down to the very front and curves all the way into this little point between the eyes. Now, if I were making this out of fabric, then I would have to make little cuts all through here so that this can curve when I put it back together. When I say curve, it can continue that shape into the dome part of the helmet. But luckily, we're making this out of foam, and the foam, you can heat it up and form it into pretty much any shape, and when it cools, it'll stay there. So I won't have to make any darts for this, and I can just flatten it out. It's still going to be a bit of a challenge because I'm going to have part of this is going to be flat and the other part's going to be curved into that dome. So this is being a problem. I may have to actually cut maybe a little dart into there just so that it doesn't affect the flat part of the helmet. I think I can force it flat. This is also going to be a little bit of a challenge when we start adding this piece on, this trim piece that goes across the back and into these pieces at the ears, because the top part of this is still curved, and when I start putting that on there, it's not going to want to go on straight. Luckily, the craft foam's fairly pliable also, so I think I can force that in place. The reason why I don't want to put a bunch of darts in here is because I don't want to have those extra seams to deal with later on. But this area should be covered up by this piece of trim here, and that seems to be the area that's giving me the most trouble, so I think I might just go ahead and put a dart in there. Yeah, that's going to make a big difference actually. This lays much flatter now because what I was worried about is that sure, I could flatten this out and put the curve back in, but it was going to affect the side pieces, and I'd never know how that was going to show itself. So now I'm going to go ahead and pin this down and then transfer my marks. Okay, I've transferred these over to the cardstock. I've cleaned it up a little bit, and now I just need to scan it in so that I can go over it one more time digitally and get perfect lines. this dotted line here is going to be where I have to go in and leave this part flat, but then put the curve of the dome into this part up here. So now it's just a matter of, I've got this divided up into the pieces that are small enough to fit onto 8.5 by 11 printer paper. So now I just need to scan them in and it'll be that much closer to starting the project. Here are the templates after I've taken them into Photoshop to clean them up. I even included I've already put in the rules. And if you look closely, you can see that they're really not completely cleaned up. They're not completely straight and smooth. I mean, I could have gone in with the pen tool and made each one of these curves perfect, but the thing is about all these little wiggles in the lines is that they match up with wiggles from the other end of that line. So, you know, the wiggles here line up perfectly with the wiggles here because they were taken, you know, as I cut these off of the template or off of the helmet that I carved out of foam. And if I straighten them both out, I might straighten these one direction and straighten these a different direction, and that would, you know, affect the shape of the helmet quite a bit. So I think we're better off, you know, I cleaned them up, but I left all of the wiggles in. That way I know that it's going to come together the same way I took it off. So here are these. It's basically the left side of the dome, the left front of the helmet, the left rear of the helmet, and the upper cheekbone piece. In this case, I'm leaving this as part of the front. If I have to, I can go ahead and cut this across here and make this a separate piece if I need to, but only if I need to. In order to get the rest of the template, the trim pieces and the ear, I'm going to have to actually go ahead and make this helmet. So that's the next step. I'll go ahead and get my foam and cut these pieces out of foam and assemble it. And then when I get that complete, then I can make my measurements for that trim piece that starts out around the ears and goes around the back, as well as the air filter system, the ear pieces themselves. That'll all come after I make a prototype helmet. So let's get on with that. Now that I have the prototype helmet in essentially the right shape, I can go ahead and go on with making the template parts. This is this trim piece and the area for the ear, and I went ahead and transferred this onto some of the black foam, the 5mm foam. And I did that because if I transferred that onto cardstock and used that to essentially be my template, it would end up too short to go around the helmet. Believe it or not, just this 5mm width alters the circumference of the helmet enough that affects the size that things need to be. So I'm going to go ahead and use this to, I've added a little extra on the end here, and I'm going to use this to find the absolute center part of this trim piece as it goes around. So at the middle part of the helmet, I'll make a mark there. And this is a little bit more difficult because it's a compound curve, because with her helmet, instead of being flat and then having the curve continues all the way down to about the bottom of this piece of trim. So not only does this have to curve this direction, it has to curve, this direction. And I don't think that'll be a problem with the barge cement. I think that'll allow me to stretch it out and get it in the right place when I actually install it, but it's going to make it a little bit difficult to get it into place here. Now I have some lines that I transferred over with the pattern so that I could make this line that runs down the middle of the helmet, and then this line right here, which is essentially the middle of the earpiece. And I can use that to line this piece up. And of course I know that this seam right here was the top of that trim piece. So once I line that up, I can take a pin and put it in at a fairly sharp angle, and that'll hold it flat against the helmet. Make sure that looks like it's in the right place. This really isn't as critical as I'm making it, because I'm really at this point just looking for the length of this, but I also want to see how it looks and make sure that it kind of looks like it's the right size and everything. This is usually where I start to stab myself with pins over and over again. Okay, that needs to be a little bit higher, it looks like. Make sure that this top edge stays where it needs to be. I think one more will be enough. Okay. I think the size looks pretty good. And so now I can just come back here and make my mark. Terrible mark. Okay. And now I know that's the absolute middle, so I can make that cut and then use this, just flip it over and give myself one solid piece that'll go across. Okay, it's time for the ear modules. This is just the ear module as it appears in the artwork that I used when I was cutting the basic shape out of the foam. I know it's to scale, and I think it comes from Disney. It's just a template that they seem to use when they're designing the paint style for Sabine's helmet. So I know that there are some differences. When I look at the actual screen captures, there's a little rectangular piece at the bottom of this piece here. But I think it's in general going to be, you know, pretty close. So I'm just starting out there. I've cut this out, and I'll use this as the basic template, I think, for the ear module. And I think it's not the same size as Boba Fett's helmet and the same style. It doesn't have all the intricate shapes in it. So I think I can get away with using just foam on this. It's not large enough for me to use it to reinforce the helmet itself like I did on Boba Fett's helmet. So I think I can just get away with using the regular EVA foam on this. But I'll give it a shot and we'll see. Okay, the prototype is coming along pretty well. I'm fairly happy with it. There's definitely, I can see some issues here, things that I'll have to change on the templates. The first thing I noticed is that this piece still isn't long enough. I think it is pretty close to the way that it is in the drawing, but here's the real problem: is if you have this and you move it forward, it's not exactly going to be in line with your eyes. It kind of shoots off to the left there, or right. So in order to bring this in, I need to make this whole thing come forward. And I think what really needs to happen is the center of the ear module needs to be in the center of the helmet. So I'll move this forward about a ½ an inch. I've also noticed that the angle's a little bit off. When everything lines up to the top, this one leans back a little bit. So what I'll do is on the pattern, I'll make a line and move this forward about 1/8 of an inch. That'll move everything to where this pretty much lines up with this upper cheekbone part here. I'm pretty happy. I only need half of the visor here. I think the right side fits better with the helmet, so basically I'll use this half and flip it over in Photoshop and make the template that way. The only thing that I really have left, this vent back here, the air filter part, is going to be really simple. It's basically you know, the same kind of thing that we did with Boba Fett, except for it's, you know, much simpler. But what's not simpler is covering up the visor itself. What I need, I think most of it's going to be pretty simple. We have to modify a little bit here so that the cover piece goes over this part here. I just need to lightly cover the outside edge of the visor, and then the hard part's going to be is it's then got to smooth out. For the most part, it'll be okay. If it has an edge here, that won't be a problem. It'll blend in with everything else, and if not, with the paint, you know, with her paint job will cover up anything there. The top part is the hard part because it really needs to be a seamless curve all the way into this point. And so I think what I'll have to do is I'll probably make the piece come up to here, and then I'll just have to sand and fill to try to blend that in. But that's what I'm going to attempt at this point. I think I can use this part of the pattern. I basically just cut this so that it will line up with the earpiece. And it should be right. I'll have to make this a little bit thicker here because there's pretty much nothing left at this point down here, just so there'll be enough to overlap. You probably can't see my finger at all. You know, I'll have to make that part right here a little bit wider this way so that it will still be able to cover the edge here, and then probably blend in with this line here. Other than that, it will basically end touching the ear module all the way up, so that won't be a problem at all. It's just really this upper edge that I'll have to blend in. So let's see how that goes. Okay, I think it turned out pretty well for a first prototype. It's got a few issues here and there. I think I've exaggerated the lower cheek areas, the way it flares out just a little bit, but that's easy enough to fix. I've already figured out what to do on the earpieces to fix those. And I used too thin a piece of craft foam for the visor trim. I just wanted to use a piece of scrap, and that's the reason why you can see the shape of the visor through it. It's just a piece of 2mm scrap. I think for the actual helmet I'll use the 5mm. It'll be fine. I think I'm going to hold off on posting a link to the templates themselves until I've completed enough of the actual helmet that I'm absolutely sure that the templates are going to work fine. And then I'll go ahead and post those. All in all, I'm very happy with the way it turned out, and I'm eager to get started with the actual build. I understand that this video didn't have very much information, but I assure you that the videos to come about the actual building of the helmet will have more than enough. Despite the fact that this video is a little bit light on instruction, I hope you found it informative and to help you understand the process that I went through in order to produce the templates, and so you'll understand where those templates came from. And if it was, please go ahead and give me a thumbs up. It's good for the channel. And subscribe so that you won't miss out on any of the upcoming videos regarding the rest of the armor and jetpack and weapons for Sabine Wren, as well as Jango Fett and Boba Fett. So I hope this has been at least a little bit entertaining and informative, and I'll see you on the next video.